Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the 16th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas Convention on Saturday. Addressing the event, he told Indians across the world that they are connected in minds because of Ma Bharati and lauded the efforts of the overseas Indians in fighting the challenges that the world faced last year. He assured the Indian diaspora that the country always stands with them, while mentioning that over 45 lakh people were repatriated under the Vande Bharat mission during the pandemic. The Prime Minister also said the lessons learnt by India during the pandemic have become an inspiration for the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, and this movement for self-reliance is meant to help others, as made in India products and solutions will benefit the world. And in this regard, he went on to speak about the two made in India coronavirus vaccines. He said India will continue to play its role as the world's pharmacy and protect humanity from COVID-19, adding that the world is not only waiting for India's vaccine, but everyone is watching how India runs the world's largest vaccination program. So as India moves forward with its self-reliance initiative, what role can the Indian diaspora play in making brand India stronger is what we will discuss on this edition of The Big Picture today. A panel of experts is joining me on the program. It is my pleasure to welcome on the program today Mr. Jayant Krishna, Group Executive Officer, UK India Business Council, former Ambassador Mr. Anil Trigunyad, and Mr. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Editor, Hindustan Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, let's begin with you by talking about the theme of the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas this year, that's contributing to Atmanirbhar Bharat. So what role can the Indian diaspora play in making India self-reliant?
Well, as you know, Tina ji, this Pravasi Bharatiya Divas is very concurrent within the COVID pandemic. And therefore, COVID has, in fact, dictated to the world, and especially to us, that we need to work towards health, towards habitat and hunger. And for all these, it is also absolutely essential that in critical areas, you acquire a certain kind of self-reliance. It also gave us that we were nowhere in the part of the global value and supply chains. So the self-reliance principle was changed in a way so that we acquire the efficiencies that will eventually be plugged into the plug. And in this context, the theme of this year's PBD is pertaining to Atmanirbhar Bharat and how the diaspora, which has always been a critical player whenever we have tried to cross the threshold. I remember when I used to be in New York in the 90s, that is the time after economic reforms, that we tried to attract a lot of companies from the US and technology. And I found that whether it was in the financial sector of the Wall Street or anywhere else, it was the Indians there at that time and those companies and good positions who veered their company's outlook towards India, and in a way the US to look at India in a different way than it was before. So I believe that their contribution is immense. But today, when we are in nearly 20 years later, when we are here, we are actually looking to move in a very different direction as far as the manufacturing practices are concerned, or even the economic growth is concerned. And in that case, in information technology, in which India, again, due to the assistance of the overseas Indians, that we have become today a knowledge economy or IT superpower in a way. And therefore, when we are moving towards the AI-driven Industrial Revolution 4.0, the role of the diaspora becomes equally important. And I think that since they are living in these big countries, the advanced countries, and they could become the living bridge for converting it. And if you remember, the very recent last year, I think we had held this one conference of all the scientists from nearly 70 countries, the Indian origin scientists, and it was called WebHub, and there they submitted about 80 projects. So today the life has to be in terms of technology and finance. So in both these, I think the significant contribution can come from the overseas Indian community, and that has been the clarion call of the Prime Minister today.
Okay, Mr. Krishna, coming to you, your perspective on the expectations from the Indian diaspora in making brand India stronger?
We have the Indian diaspora all over the world, which totals to almost 3.2 crores people, 32 million people. And you'll be surprised to know that India is the top receiver of all financial remittances into the country. Almost 13% of the global remittances that come from non-residents come to India. And close to 3% of our GDP actually come from remittances from overseas Indians, or people of Indian origin. And largely this comes from countries like the US, UK, UAE, Canada, Australia, and these kind of things. So I think these people have been playing a very integral, huge role in the economy of the country. Even if you look at the Atmanirbhar Bharat story, the ambition of government, I think a lot is happening. And during COVID times, if you look at the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is getting manufactured by the Serum Institute of India. There's a classic example where research and development happened in one country, but the manufacturing is happening in our country, not just for our captive requirement, but for rollout all over the world, for exports all over the world. I mean, you have Rolls-Royce, which is talking about, co-creation and co-development of light combat aircraft engine in India. If you look at JCB, for example, I mean, I'm talking about these British companies because since I come from UK India Business Council, their largest manufacturing base is in India, and not just for the captive use from Indian operations. They export, equipment to all over the world. If you look at Delarue, they are prepared to transfer technology for security features enabled currency note, printing in India. So there are lots of examples. I mean, if you look at, for example, UK as a country, almost 1.8% of UK's population comprises of in the Indian diaspora. But look at their contribution to the GDP. They contribute much higher. They themselves, and by virtue of the companies that they run in the UK, they contribute about almost 6% to the GDP of of the country. So these are Indian companies are the second largest investor. India is the second largest investor into the UK, and it contributes. Those companies, the Indian companies, contribute almost 4% to the GDP of the country. So I think there's a give and take. UK is the largest investor, second fastest growing G20 investor into India. And, and it's very clear. See, initially there were some apprehensions that Atmanirbhar Bharat will perhaps isolate the Indian economy from the rest of the world. But the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has talked about it time and again, that if at all, it means a greater integration of the Indian economy with the global economy, So I see lots of opportunities, happening that way, Tina.
Okay. Mr. Chaudhary, both our panelists have spoken about the contribution of Indian diaspora being quite immense when it comes to economic growth. And now, of course, they're also expected to play a major role in making India self-reliant. But what are the new opportunities that the government is giving them, in the sense that which are the sectors where there are increased and, of course, hassle-free investment opportunities for them?
Well, the government anyway, the Modi government has been making the country much more business and investment friendly over the past 6 years. It's increased FDI limits in a whole host of industries. And also I would say that by making the OCI PIO system more streamlined, merging them together and making it easier for people of Indian origin to both receive the card and perhaps more importantly, to get some economic advantages from owning those cards. It has clearly made that much easier. It has also clearly added that Indian management control of companies is important for sensitive areas, but it incorporates PIOs in that definition. So in a whole host of areas, we've seen life is a lot easier, I would argue, for Indian investors coming to India. We're also seeing, as the others have mentioned, that while in the initial phase, we saw Indians serving as bridges between Silicon Valley and Bangalore as far back as the 1980s and 1990s, and that in many ways the basis of the modern IT sector in India. We're now seeing that Indians have become prominent businessmen, corporate leaders in many Western countries, notably Britain, but of course the United States, as well as big players in the financial sector. This means that they can now act as bridges for investment in greenfield, brownfield manufacturing, which is something they did not do before, and increasingly also for bringing in financial investments, whether portfolio or otherwise, into the country. We now have a number of prominent Indians. When Indians are among the wealthiest minorities in places like Britain, they're far the wealthiest in the United States. And so that as a consequence, it's not just that they will make decisions on the basis of commercial interests of their companies, obviously, but they know India and they are not scared of India the way a lot of non-Indians would be. They're familiar with systems and don't necessarily look at the headlines in the newspaper in the West and get excited and say, this is not a place to put my money. So we've seen record amounts of foreign capital flow coming into the country. We're seeing a large number of technology understandings coming, technology flow into the country in the past 6 years, especially in the past 2 years. Just in the area of healthcare, you mentioned with the COVID situation, the number of you've seen, if you just look at the number of people of Indian origin who serve as epidemiologists, doctors, virologists, healthcare specialists all across the world. It's actually been quite amazing. And you get a real sense of how integrated overseas Indians are into the healthcare and COVID and pandemic response globally. And which is one of the reasons why Prime Minister Modi can raise this and say that India is contributing, I believe he uses will be saving mankind or saving the world in the long run as we start to roll out the pandemic, but also because we are the world's largest producers of vaccines. But it's also helped because we are so deeply integrated via the diaspora into the global healthcare system.
Ambassador, taking that point forward on the prominent role that the Indians play worldwide. In fact, the Prime Minister also spoke about, the trust in Indian origin people, which is becoming greater in parts of the world. They're doing exemplary work in their country of residence. So when it comes to taking made in India products and solutions to the world, what role can we expect from the overseas Indians?
You see, the first thing is you have to be very competitive. At the end of the day, when you want to get into any market,